dog had to cross a stream. There was a bridge across the stream. To get to the other side, the dog began walking across it. Through the gaps in wooden bridge, the dog could see his own reflection. But the foolish dog thought that it was another dog staring at him. And to his annoyance, this dog also had a really nice, juicy-looking bone in his mouth. He decided that he had to have the other dog's bone as well. The greedy fellow put down his bone. As soon as he did this, the bone fell into the water, and he stood looking surprised at his own reflection. The poor dog realized what had happened. He was terribly upset at losing his bone. He said to himself, "Let that be a lesson to me, never to be so greedy again." Indeed, he never was quite as greedy ever again. The clever kid goat. Once there was a herd of goats that lived on a huge farm. They were allowed to graze in the meadows. They were guarded by some sheepdogs, as they were terribly ferocious wolves that lived in the nearby forest. They might pounce on them and gobble them up. Among the herd of goats was a tiny little kid goat. Since he was the youngest, his mother always told him, "Never wander off into the forest alone." One day, the little goat was merrily munching some grass that was very sweet. He wandered away into the forest, following the path the sweet grass took. In the forest sat a wicked wolf. He saw the kid goat all alone and was pleased. "He will certainly make a tasty meal," he said to himself. The wicked wolf jumped out at the kid goat and bared his long, sharp, yellow teeth and said, "You should not wander away all alone, you know." The kid goat was terrified on seeing the wolf and trembled with fear. But he said bravely, "I do know that I have been very naughty by wandering away all alone." The wolf laughed loudly at him. "Now that you've been naughty, I shall have to punish you. I shall eat you up for lunch," he said in a booming voice. The kid goat was very scared. He knew that he had to save himself somehow, so he thought of a plan. "Oh, wolf, won't you grant me one last wish?" he begged. "Of course I will," said the wolf. "It can do me no harm." "Oh, kind wolf, I have heard people say that you have a lovely voice. Won't you sing me a song?" he asked. The wolf was immensely flattered and began to sing with great enthusiasm. The sheepdogs heard the noise and wondered what the matter was. Suddenly, one of them exclaimed, "I do believe the little kid goat is missing." He rushed into the forest just as he was reaching the middle of the song. He nearly tore him to pieces, but the wolf was lucky to escape with his life. "Thank you so much for rescuing me. I promise never to run away like that again. I'm sorry. I will always listen to my elders." A bad dinner. Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful, slender lady in a tiny little cottage in the forest. Next to her cottage was another tiny little cottage that belonged to a fox. The two of them were firm friends and spent most of their days doing things together. But unknown to the crane, the fox was actually a wicked fellow. One day he went over to the crane's house. "Won't you have dinner with me tomorrow evening?" dear friend?" he asked. The crane agreed. She was glad she didn't have to eat all alone. The next evening, the crane dressed up. She tied a pretty red ribbon around her neck and she put on a matching red bonnet and left her house. In the fox's house, they played a nice game of checkers, which the crane won, much to the fox's annoyance. After the game, the fox asked the crane to come into the dining room, for he was to serve dinner. He had laid out the tables beautifully with a pretty candle, which glowed brightly on the flowering table. The fox went into the kitchen and came out with two plates of porridge. He placed one in front of the crane and set one down at his place. "Eat up," he said to the crane. He sat himself down and began gobbling up his dinner very quickly. The poor crane was not able to eat out of the plate with her long beak. She generally ate out of a long and slender vase. She pecked at the porridge for a while and then gave up trying to eat. The crane did not complain about the dinner at all. Before leaving, she said to the fox, "Thank you for a wonderful dinner. Please come to my house for dinner tomorrow evening." "I certainly shall," said the fox. But the crane had decided to teach the fox a lesson. So the next evening at her house, she too served porridge for dinner, but in two long vases. She looked at the shocked face of the fox with an amused expression on her face. "Eat up," she said. The crane put her beak into the vase and began eating. However, this time it was the fox that was unable to eat. His snout would not fit into the slender vase, so he sat meekly at the table, feeling very foolish. The fox realized that the crane was teaching him a lesson. He felt very bad and apologized to the crane. "You have taught me a valuable lesson. I shall never again be petty and mean." The kind crane forgave him at once. Saving a wolf. Once upon a time, there was a big gray wolf sitting outside his den in the forest. He was chomping away on his lunch, which happened to be a very big, tasty piece of meat. Now, the wolf was very hungry indeed. He had been gobbling up his food so very quickly that he soon began to choke on a bone. The wolf began making rasping noises with his throat as the bone was stuck in his throat really tight. The poor wolf kept screaming, "Help! Help!" But the noises that came out of his throat sounded very different indeed. In the forest nearby, there was a crane that was enjoying her lunch as well. When she heard the wolf's noises, she was terribly alarmed. "I wonder what on earth that noise can be," she said to herself. When the noises didn't stop, she decided to go and see what the matter was. The crane walked in the direction of the sound and soon came upon the wolf. The poor fellow was hopping about the place wildly, with tears streaming down his face, for the bone was hurting him awfully. When she realized what had happened, she went to the wolf and said, "Now, dear, don't panic. Open your mouth wide and let me see where the bone is stuck. I can pull it out soon enough." The wolf opened his mouth wide. The crane peered into his mouth. She soon saw the bone lodged inside. The only way to get the bone out of the wolf's throat was to put her beak into his throat. "This might hurt you, but it's got to be done," she said. She put her beak in and tried to reach the bone, but it was lodged well and truly deep in his throat. The crane then put her whole head into the wolf's mouth. She finally managed to get a grip on the bone and pull it out of his throat. The wolf was very relieved that he had been saved. "Thank you, kind crane, for foolish crane did not realize that she had been lucky to pull her head out of the wolf's mouth safely. She asked, "Where is my reward?" The wolf got angry and yelled, "You put your head into a wolf's mouth and managed to come out alive. That is reward enough." The crane fled into the forest, glad that she had come out of the situation alive. She realized that greed did not go well with gratitude. "I ought to be grateful to be running away alive instead of worrying about reward," she thought. Sour grapes. Once upon a time, there was a big furry fox that lived with his fox family in the woods. It was the fox's job to hunt for food for his family. He would stroll through the jungle looking for food. Since it was summer and his fur was thick and furry, the fox used to feel very hot indeed. On one such occasion, he came to a vineyard that was full of ripe grapes. The fox was very surprised. "I must not have come to this part of the woods before," he thought to himself. "I would surely remember such a beautiful vineyard." The vines were beautiful and green. There were big, juicy purple grapes hanging from them. The big bunches weighed the vines down. The fox looked at the grapes greedily. His mouth began to water at the sight of them. He was so tired and thirsty that he decided grapes were just the right thing for him. "By hook or crook, I've got to have some of these grapes," he said. He stood up on his hind legs and tried jumping up to reach them. It was of no use, as the vines were much too high for the fox to reach. The delicious little grapes were out of his reach. "I know what I'll have to do," exclaimed the fox. "I'll crouch down really low and then jump up with all my might. That ought to do the trick." So he crouched down and sprang out, but he missed the grapes by just a whisker and tumbled to the ground in dismay. Then the fox had another idea. He saw a stone on the ground near him, so he went and pushed it with all his might and finally managed to roll the big stone under the grapevine. "Now I'll reach the grapes for sure," he said. He clambered onto the stone and stood up on his hind legs and began to jump up and down again. But the poor fellow still couldn't reach the bunch of grapes. He really wanted to eat some of the grapes, but he could not reach them at all. The fox was very, very upset, and he began to howl. "All my hard work for nothing, all in vain. I shall never be able to reach those grapes." However, he decided that he would try to reach those delicious little grapes just one more time. So from the stone that he was standing on, he crouched down and sprang up at the grapes. But he only ended up hurting himself as he took a nasty fall again. The poor fox got up and limped away into the distance. Since he hadn't succeeded in reaching the grapes, he consoled himself by saying, "The grapes are probably sour anyway." He vowed never to go into that part of the woods again.